Dr. Maier is a professor and head of Department of Grain Science at Kansas State University. His research focus is on engineered technologies for the protection of stored products and the delivery of identity-preserved, traceable, and biosecure quality of grain to the food, industrial biofuels, and feed processing industries. He has secured more than $15 million in research, technology transfer, and extension education grants.
Thank you, Ajit. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this Global Engagement Day, and I really want to say thank you to the organizers. I've learned a lot this morning and throughout the day from each of the speakers, and it's great to see the ag engineering community being and becoming more engaged in this area. Part of the reason I guess I was invited on this, I'm the lead PI and co-PI, co-director of the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for the reduction of post-harvest loss, which is one of the USAID Feed the Future Innovation Labs. And that's kind of what I want to focus on in terms of what that is all about. We competed in this grant application. The RFA was led in about October of 2012. And we explored the opportunity to collaborate with various institutions, and then we put a team together that we felt was going to be competitive against other institutions that we were aware of that were leading efforts. We are co-leading this with University of Illinois through the ADM Institute, and you'll hear about that afterwards. And our cooperating universities are Oklahoma State, Fort Valley State, South Carolina State University of Nebraska, and University of Kentucky, representing individual faculty, researchers that have, in our view, complementary skills to be competitive and to also execute the project. Our award is similar as the previous speakers. Other than Ajit, we also are not giving out any grant funding. Ours is a basic Leader with Associate Award, and that means that the base funding from USAID headquarters is $5 million. We leveraged the project with about another $3 million for a total grant, total of $8.2 million. We got 1.25 to start with for year one, but the total USAID amount that might be available is up to $25 million, and those funds would have to come from USAID mission offices in other Feed the Future countries or in some other funding. And that is the opportunity then to collaborate further, and that's really the funding opportunity that I would put before all of you to consider and think about how we might collaborate on post-harvest loss reduction and food waste reduction in mostly the durable crops. There is another lab, the Hort Lab at UC Davis, that focuses a little bit more on the perishables, and we try to collaborate with them. This is the primary mission purpose of the lab, provide global leadership in food security by focusing on reducing post-harvest loss. Again, the focus is on the staple crops, and the key is research and education aimed at confronting some of the constraints that smallholder and subsistence farmers are confronting, producer co-ops and agribusiness enterprises, by tying in with the market-based value chain. So we also have quite a bit of expertise assembled in the grains processing area, from flour milling to baked product development to feed manufacturing and so forth. So it's not just limited to stored grains types of research. One might wonder, why is USAID involved? And I'm glad for what Ajit presented, and I have just a slightly different, maybe additional complementary angle of the funding. USAID, of course, we often think about the emergency and development food aid assistance that they provide. Fiscal year 2012, over $2 billion, and over 1.5 million metric tons of in-kind food shipments, much of it from the United States. And so our farmers are always very keen to understand better the food commodity shipments and procurement, but also more regional procurement. And so when you look at USAID food assistance, you have the typical emergency programs that fall under Title II in-kind food aid that many of us are probably familiar with. And then you have the development programs, which is what all of our Feed the Future and what Ajit presented kind of falls under, where USAID is focusing on development food assistance to target the underlying causes of hunger and help really address agricultural production, malnutrition, health issues that relate to food. And the Feed the Future initiative is actually another very unique thing, and you can get all of this from various websites, because it involves multiple government agencies. So while the Feed the Future initiative is housed within USAID, which is within the State Department, there are the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Department of Defense, Department of Energy, a number of Commerce Department are all involved as government agency in the Feed the Future initiative. And the underlying belief is that global hunger is solvable. And I think this is one of the things that makes it also exciting for engineers to be able to contribute to that effort overall. Does post-harvest loss reduction matters? We had an excellent presentation this morning by a colleague from South Africa, and I just want to add here just this one slide. It matters because in its absence, it reduces absolute availability of food at all levels. That means countries that are food insecure end up having to import food, which again is all these issues of sustainability that have been mentioned and is important, and the other security issues. It reduces farmer income, increases costs, unnecessary burdens to the ecosystem. There are concerns about food quality and conditions in terms of affecting access to market. The saleable volume, both in terms of quality and the quantity and quality, which is so often we forget about that, and then effectively raises the cost of production and everything beyond that. Also, it lowers the opportunities for value-added opportunities. We saw earlier this morning that value addition occurs in the supply chain, and I thought that was a very important concept to understand. So if there's not enough crops available, you can't add value through feed manufacturing, feeding into the animal livestock system. You can't add value by flour milling or baking and all these other types of grain food production systems. And of course, it has then a negative impact on the economic growth. Interestingly and not surprisingly, there have been many past funding support and efforts. There's a substantial development literature out there that people can access. Even at Kansas State University, we had at one time a so-called Food and Feed Grains Institute, which was one of the longest-running USAID projects on record. And about 2 years ago, there was not a lot of documentation on that, so I wrote a little web page that's on our website and linked to the USAID government database. And when you Google with the right term, you find about 130-some records of the Food and Feed Grains Institute from all the reports and everything that was generated over the length of period. And you'd be very surprised when you look at the titles how familiar some of those sound. We had dozens of master's and PhD theses and dissertations that were generated at Kansas State along those topics, and many of those are well known. There's a lot of assessment work in the 70s and 80s. There have been appropriate technology development in the 80s and 90s. And then there's been a number of significant donor-funded programs. One is the African Post-Harvest Loss Information System that is primarily managed through the National Resource Institute in the UK. And of course, in recent years, the Missing Food Report that, again, generated a lot of interest among people. And here, kind of the bridging the gap between the past and the future. This is a slide from the ADM Institute, and quoting Henry Kissinger and the General Assembly of the United Nations, with a goal that by 1985, post-harvest loss would be cut into half. 1985. And then most recently, in 2013, the Chicago Council of Global Affairs, in developing country, the target is to reduce post-harvest loss by half. So we haven't progressed very much in terms of these types of statements. We're still facing some of the same challenges. So when you look at some of the present funding and efforts, the United Nations, of course, have picked up on this. G8 countries are concerned. They have the food loss and waste efforts there. There's a number of agribusinesses stepping up, and we've talked about the private sector involvement. Very important. Partners in Food Solutions is an organization that was founded by General Mills that encourages employees to volunteer their time to go in various countries and provide expertise in food processing. Cargill has joined them, and a Buehler company has joined them recently. The ADM Institute, of course, investment by ADM in the University of Illinois. Nestle is one company. We heard other examples this morning that has some significant value chain investments that they've made to connect producers into their supply chain. And so these private-public partnerships are indeed forming and have an impact. The international aid agencies are getting involved. Foundations are getting active. The Gates Foundation, the PICS project at Purdue was the first in the early 2000s project in the agriculture area that the Gates Foundation at the time invested in. We often forget that 10 years later. Rockefeller Foundation looking at investing somewhere around $80, $100, $120 million in the post-harvest loss area pretty soon. And then, of course, CGIRs have included this as well. Our innovation lab focuses on Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Ghana, and Guatemala. It's 4 out of the 19 Feed the Future countries. And was pointed out earlier what defines those Feed the Future countries. In Ghana alone, the agricultural system struggles with post-harvest loss. About a third of their maize and a third of the cassava products is lost along their respective value chains. So those are substantial numbers. Our innovation lab goals, I won't go through all of those. They're on our website, reducephl.org. Talks about capacity, enhancing capacity on the post-harvest system and connecting people to the value chain. But it also includes the cultural, social, and economic factor. I've shared this picture yesterday. It's kind of a nice setting, a nice demonstration of the cultural challenges. In the background, you've got a metal silo that was placed there through the Swiss Development Corporation and the CIMMYT efforts a number of years ago. It's still sitting there. It's being utilized to some extent, but at the same time, you still have the ear corn hanging up in the rafters to be dried because of the moisture reduction challenges. And so when you're talking about technical solutions, you have to understand and consider the cultural and economic and social context as well, which will be part of our efforts. Interestingly, as we've gotten started with our assessment work over the last 6 months, the mycotoxin issue is a substantial concern, often undetected or unrealized, and so there's other efforts to the peanut and mycotoxin innovation lab at University of Georgia and the IPM innovation lab at Virginia Tech that are also looking at that and that we're looking to collaborate with. Again, our team between K-State and University of Illinois are co-leading that. And the center is integrated into our IGP Institute. And the reason I mention that is that our original mission of the IGP Institute, the International Grains Program at K-State, is a farmer-driven mission of increasing the utilization and export and consumption of U.S. grains produced in the Great Plains states. And so when you think about that, how does that tie in and fit with the mission of helping people increase their production in terms of preserving their harvest in developing countries? Well, our farmers get it because if you increase and improve the economies in various countries, you're going to have future potential customers for grains and other types of products. And so they get that our effort is very complementary and not in conflict or competition with our original mission. So key points here as I'm wrapping up. Addressing food security through reduction of post-harvest loss is very important. It's very complex. It merits more serious thought and considerably more action than it's been getting in the past 20 years. Very little work has been done in that area. Most technical and best practice solutions generally already exist, but there are some substantial application, adaptation, adoption research, demonstration, scale-up, value chain analysis, and consensus building that is still needed. Big money is showing interest but must be attracted, guided, nurtured. The success of the Purdue PICS and the efforts by CIMMYT Metal Silo Project have attracted substantial attention and funding, and they have had some real-world impact on smallholder and subsistence farmers, so definitely hats off to those projects. But we need to make a better development and business case that engages more stakeholders and shareholders. Investors want real-world impact today, and the focus is a lot more stringently on metrics, measurement, and in order to implement mitigation. And then although technical advances are critical, there are impediments related, as again this morning we've heard by numerous speakers throughout the day, that have to consider behavioral, organizational, marketing, social, cultural, gender, environmental, and political context as well. And so it's not an engineering solution that is a standalone aspect. I hope all of you are aware of this book. I've read it, and I have encouraged our students to read it. I love this quote from Howard Buffett, particularly when you're faced with a really challenging project like we're involved in. I'll always be a pessimistic optimist, but the effort to lift people out of the dehumanizing and painful state of food insecurity will always be worth it, and sometimes it will even work. And so I hope all the efforts that all of us are involved in as presented today can have an impact and make a difference. And with that, I appreciate the opportunity, Ajit, and thank you for having me.